I sent to you a clip of part of the interview that I had with Dr. French, and I just wanted to get a brief response on a couple of points.
I personally have never had any success in replicating the effects that Rupert seems to find. Not only that, my project students who are not as skeptical as I am, and in fact are usually big fans of Rupert's, they've also failed to replicate the effects that Rupert's got. In the past, I've had project students looking at the detection of staring kind of paradigms. Again, we didn't get positive, significant results.
Let's talk a little bit to begin with about some of the replications that Dr. French's group has done of your experiments. Now, he was pretty direct in saying that he has never, nor have any of his students, ever been able to replicate any of your experiments, despite many attempts. Would you have anything to comment on that statement?
Well, yes. I mean, it sounds as if he's tried really hard over a long period of time and nothing I do ever works when they do it. It's not quite like that. First of all, there haven't been that many attempts. He did a staring experiment. I think it was the first thing that he did that was related to my own work. He used different methods from ones I'd used. And his student came up with a result that was statistically significant by one test and not significant by another. Probably the one that they used was the most appropriate, but it was on the borderline of significance. So I asked for the data to analyze it using different statistical procedures. They'd used a t-test, and there were other ways of doing the analysis, and I just wanted to see how that would work. And he said, oh, well, I couldn't do that because they'd discarded the data. So I wouldn't say that was an unambiguous failure. I think that it was an interesting result, and it was on the borderline of significance, and it all depended on which tests you did. But the heads I win, tails you lose. Chris French says that psychic researchers do this. Actually, I think skeptics do it more. If they get a result that shows no effect, then they say, oh, well, it hasn't worked, there's no phenomenon here. If there's a positive result, as there are in many of my own experiments, then they say, oh, well, the experiments must be flawed in some way. So I think this way of arguing works absolutely both ways, and actually Chris French admits that. But when we come to one of the most important replications he's tried to do of my work, the telephone telepathy experiments, these have been done under very tightly controlled conditions. And Chris French tried to replicate this. He got a couple of students on the case. They only managed to recruit 10 subjects, and actually I recruited 9 of them for them because I wanted to help them out. And Chris insisted on a procedure whereby all the people who were calling them had to be in a particular place at a particular time. They all had to be filmed. The subjects had to be filmed. And in these experiments, the results were pretty near chance. He would say this is because when you do it really rigorously, the effect goes away. I would say that if you get people doing something fairly sensitive like telepathy, which works unconsciously, you get everyone on edge. You get them really nervous, feeling they're being treated as if they're cheating, and everyone involved is treated as if they're a cheat. Then you create conditions of nervousness that interfere with the phenomenon. I think that skeptics doing the experiments in a way that implies extreme distrust of everyone involved is likely to be inhibitory of the phenomenon. Now, when Chris French and I discussed this experiment before they did it, we said to each other what we'd probably say. And I said, okay, Chris, well, if it gives non-significant results, I'm probably going to say that, this extreme skeptical leaning on everybody involved in a way that treats them as if they're under suspicion of cheating all the time is going to inhibit the effect. And I said, what are you going to say if there's a positive effect? And he said, I'm going to say that the controls weren't rigorous enough, and we'll have to do it with even more rigorous control. Chris and I, both of us in advance, realized that whatever the result, neither of us was going to say, okay, the phenomenon exists or it doesn't exist.